And Lester, we are live. Ooh, what a game, right?
Burn the tape. Burn the tape.
Burn it. Burn it.
I
Burn
mean,
it
there's
fast.
nothing positive to take out of that game, offensively,
No.
defensively. I mean, Justin Fields, I understand wanted to get him some reps, but at some point, the coach staff had to look at that game and say, "This is pointless."
I mean,
Terrible.
the worst part about it, Lester, is that I sit here like I try as best I can. I know you do exactly the same thing. I try as best I can to be as objective as possible about this Bears team, right? And in science, one of the things that they teach you all the time is that when you're running an experiment, Lester, you want to control as many variables as possible. You can't come to a conclusion if everything is just chaos, right? And the problem is that at least from what I'm seeing, it's like, and we'll say this when we start the podcast, but it feels like when the Bears offensive line and the quarterback get it right, the wide receivers foul it up. When the wide receivers and the offensive line get it right, maybe Justin Fields makes a mistake. When the wide receivers get it right and the quarterback gets it right, the offensive line fouls it up. Like when it comes to passing the ball, well, frankly, the whole offense, but especially passing the football, it's just this cacophony of mistakes. And I feel like if I had to assign percentages just so that I don't end up with Bears fans, screaming at me for suggesting that Justin Fields is culpable for any of this, I feel like it's like for what would you say, Lester? Like 42.5% wide receivers, 42.5% offensive line, and 15% quarterback. Like I feel like the quarterback lately has gotten a lot better. He's just not perfect. You know what I mean? And it's frustrating. It's exhausting even.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. It's first off, you're talking about a scientific approach, but it's like I'm back in Bear and Balance with my co-host Jeff Burkus, the actual scientist. Look at this. This is some good channel synergy going on here. Yeah, the Justin Fields wasn't good today. I mean, it's clear, but you know what? At some point, it looked like he got hurt again. Hip, maybe some blow to the head. I mean, he looked a little wobbly at one point. I don't know what was going on, but some of the decisions he made were pretty bad. He didn't want to run at some point. So I don't know. Like you said, once we get the podcast going, we'll get going. And, it's New Year's Day. Let's get this thing started and let's get this thing popping.
Let's just do it. For those of you in the audience, we'll spend a little bit of time afterwards doing Q&A. It's New Year's Day. This was a terrible, terrible football game. And so while we can talk about it now, it may be best to save a lot of the discussion for All 20 Tuesday, which I don't know if you heard that, Lester, but that's what I'm going to try to roll with because it's a way better name.
All 20 Tuesday. Oh, man, that's beautiful.
But anyways.
Trademark that right now. Put it on a T-shirt. Man, that's a good one.
All right. Anyways, let's do this. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Me, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, right here on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel. And I am here with Lester Wiltfong covering a horrible Bears loss in Motown as the final score was 10-41. The Lions absolutely destroyed the Bears. I mean, it was 10-38 in the near early parts of the third quarter. Like, Lester, this one went as south can go. I mean, what are your initial takeaways from this game?
Well, at one point it was the Bears had 11 points according to Fox broadcast, and that accidental 11th point was actually the highlight of the Bears second half there. So it was good to see that from Fox. Just awful game. Offense was bad. Defense was bad. Effort was bad. I hate questioning a team's effort, but it just looked like these guys did not want to play football today. It's New Year's Day. They suck. The Lions have something to play for. The Bears have nothing to play for. And it's human nature. Yeah, you want to go out there and do your best, but you can kind of see what's going on here.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, if anything, Lester, I feel like so much went wrong. It's almost impossible to draw rational conclusions about just about everything. I mean, was this defensive line good? No. So when they got absolutely run on by whatever the Lions wanted to do, does that surprise us? Not really. Do either of us think that the Bears receivers are good? No. So when they can't get open, or when Cole Kmet and Dante Pettis drop the passes that did get delivered to them, like, that sucks. But what's
Yeah.
new. I mean, what I will ask you about before I just spill right through it, what did you think about the sacks? I'll get the number on just how many there were. I know
7.
Sack Watch is going to keep you awfully busy, but in general, did you think it was like just first watch, not having anything else to go off of? Do you feel like it was split between the quarterback and the offensive line? Would you pin it more on the offensive line? Like, how are you generally feeling about the line play today?
Braxton Jones got bull rushed at least twice that I know of. When I go back and watch the tape, obviously I'll know a little more. But the bad game for Braxton Jones, literally 1 week after I did a Braxton Jones breakdown. So that's not good there for the channel, obviously. But it's then a couple times Justin Fields looks like he held the ball too long. And I don't think I have given a Justin Fields blame on a sack in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So he's probably going to get at least one. I know there was one where he ran out of bounds. That's going to be his sack. It was rough. I mean, the pass pro was awful. I mean, but that's been all season long. Justin Fields is now the most sacked quarterback in the history of the Bears franchise in a single season. He passed Jay Cutler's record of 52 sacks. He was sacked 52 times in 2010. So Justin Fields now has that record all by himself.
And I mean, he did it in 16 games too. So you can't say it's the 17 game thing.
Actually,
right?
Jay Cutler did it in 15 as well.
Well, so did Fields because he missed the Jets game.
Yeah. It's rough.
But I can't help but feel like, Lester, if there's one comment I almost wish we could banish, and it's not calling you on that you said it, but the fact that this was a game where I felt like not being able to see the all 22 was worse than ever, because as Fields sat there holding the ball too long. I mean, that's the only adjective we can use, right, Lester? Because it's the only thing we can see. You know, if the receivers weren't separating, I would have loved to know that as a fan. And we'll have to wait until all 22's day to really take a look at that. But it's just frustrating as a football fan sitting here on a game just like today, Lester, having no idea what actually went wrong because we can't see the primary half of the field when the Bears are running a passing play. I mean, even when the Lions are doing it, all we get to look at is a beautiful offensive line keeping nobody near Jared Goff and him throwing strikes to wide open Lions that have 2 to 3 yards of separation. I mean, you want to talk about the shoe being on the other foot, Lester? The Lions felt like they were living a dream that Bears fans could be jealous of, because in all phases of this game today, the Bears just got creamed. I mean, there's no two ways about it, right?
All phases. Yeah, the all 22 would be nice. And that's one of the nice things about that Amazon broadcast is you have the option to kind of turn on the alternative view, which is a little bigger screen. I'm not sure if it's the actual all 22, but it's a bigger field. You can see what's going on there. And it's nice to know as Bears fans who watch the all 22, and I got to tell you, all 20, what is it? All 22 Tuesday. Oh man, that's a great name. I love that. But as fans that have watched the all 22 and we've seen these Bears receiving core struggle all season long, my guess is there's going to be some times where just Justin Fields had nowhere to go with the ball. Part of it is a leaky pass pro. Part of it is definitely the receivers. I mean, again, today, Byron Pringle, Equanimeous St. Brown, Chase Claypool barely played in the first half. I don't know what his deal is. He definitely has the speed and the size to be able to get himself open, but we haven't seen it so far as a Chicago Bears. So I just want to sim the season, man. I want to get the season over with. I think the Vikings, now they have something to play for next week.
Thank goodness.
The Bears clearly don't. I'm okay if the Bears let Justin Fields take next week off. I just think that he may have some, like I said, hip, hamstrings, maybe something with the head. I mean, it just didn't seem like the same Justin Fields we've seen the last few weeks. And if you're gonna bench someone, that's the time to do it. Last game of the year, nothing to play for. Let's get the hell out of here and get the season over with.
Well, I feel like ironically, Lester, Fields did look like much the same player that we've seen for weeks until he broke off that 60-yard run. And I don't know if you feel like you saw things the way that I feel like I saw things, but it felt as if about halfway through that run, we saw Fields just run out of gas. I don't know if this was the fatigue of the season. I mean, it could be. It could be that simple, right? He's been running an awful lot, not just yardage, but like raw distance on the football field. But it feels like that was an exact run that once he split those safeties, if this was week 8, he finishes a touchdown, right? Yeah. And I'm not upset about it. Truly, I don't care. Like the fact that we've got a quarterback that can turn that kind of a corner and create 60-yard rushing plays on third downs from the pocket is awesome as is. But it does bring up concerns, Lester, on it felt like from that moment in the early first quarter, Fields was hurt and he was still playing as Michael Schofield left the game. Tevin Jenkins left the game. Like whatever was left on the Bears offensive line suddenly turned into Dieter Isolin playing significant minutes for the rest of the game. And just problems at quarterback. I mean, it felt to me, Lester, like Fields spent the entire game, almost the entire game, frustrated that he had to play it. I mean, far be it from me to actually suppose one thing or another, but he didn't look like he trusted the offensive line. He didn't look like he wanted to be there. He didn't look like he trusted his wide receivers. And I mean, it created a lot of it further put a microscope on a lot of the bad habits that I think we've been talking about within Justin Fields' game for a little while. And that's what makes this game, to me, Lester, so frustrating. It's not, wow, Justin Fields is suddenly bad. It's more like Fields seemed like he got frustrated at the situation around him. Then he held onto the ball a little bit longer to make sure his receivers were a little bit more open, which they don't seem like they were, challenged an offensive line to block even better as they lost personnel and frankly just got smoked at both tackle positions. And it was just a top to bottom awful game. If the Bears decide to claim Fields isn't healthy enough to start in the last week, I will tell you, Lester, that it's going to break my heart just a little bit that Fields can't break that rushing record. I mean, he is so close. What is it? He's about 70, 80 yards away at this point, like a very manageable number for a guy who's now cracked off more 50-plus yard quarterback runs than I think the last 5 seasons of quarterbacks combined. He's doing some amazing things as a quarterback runner, but I don't disagree with anybody out there that says that this style of play is unsustainable. I think Fields knows it isn't sustainable. I think Fields tried to play that whole second half in the quote unquote more sustainable method of quarterbacking, and nobody came open, much like what we saw in Buffalo, where he was throwing to the flat on time. He threw to the flat today to Cole Kmet. It had a couple nice checkdowns in the early part of the game that then they were able to score off of. It's just, Lester, it's frustrating seeing a team that I saw a Lions reporter describe as not even practice squad level playing with Justin Fields. And yet with everybody else hurt, Fields still has to play the game. It is a bizarre watch as a Bears fan, you know?
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, it was like we said, nothing was positive to come out of this. Justin Fields, I think you had a tweet earlier talking about some of those bad habits. You don't want to see him getting these bad habits with the ball. And if he doesn't trust his O-line, which it seemed like he didn't today, and who could blame him? I mean, the Bears tried a little bit of quick game stuff, and the pressure's on him so quick. I saw some people saying, hey, Justin Fields has to step up away from some pressure. There's really nowhere to step up to. I mean, if the pressure's coming from more than one spot, I mean, if it was just one spot that's kind of have some pressure leaking on him, maybe you can kind of scheme around it or work through it, but Braxton Jones got worked. Riley Reif got worked. You know, the interior got worked a little bit. So there was just nothing for him to do. Too many drops again. We've seen all season long. He had like we said, 7 sacks. He had 7 completions. So that was just a brutal game all around.
Horrible. And I will ask, Lester, just so that we can have the conversation, right? I mean, when it comes to Justin Fields stepping up in the pocket, at least what I'm visualizing isn't like, okay, I hope I can explain this well. There are some times where a quarterback feels pressure and steps up in the pocket to evade a rusher, right? But my understanding is that there are also plenty of opportunities where a quarterback can see the angle that the edges are taking and that those edges are flattening down and just preemptively step up in the pocket to aid the tackle. So not evading per se, like not the feels pressure steps up into the pocket, but more the stuff that you've seen a lot of standard pocket passers do. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, even Jared Goff, that motion, you know what I'm talking about, Lester, where they hit the back of their drop and immediately they take a hard step forward and then frankly shuffle forward again most of the time to go from like a 9-yard drop depth to like a 5-yard drop depth. But to your point, Lester, I don't know that Fields trusts his interior enough to do that, because the moment you do that and you step up into somebody that one of those early sacks came from, it looked like the right guard, it must have been Tevin Jenkins, getting absolutely smoked by a double blitz up that B gap. And if you step up into that, you may not finish the game. So you tell me, like, when you're watching Fields, because I know how hard it makes it on a quarter or on an offensive tackle when your quarterback takes these deep drops that Fields likes to take. Is there any part of this that you think could or should be worked in the offseason on just how Fields can make things maybe a little bit easier for his tackles when life is hard?
I mean, that's a scheme thing. I mean, if they're calling 7-step drops and, that's the coaching staff, they want him to get to that point to deliver the ball.
Right.
And with the timing based offense, when he hits the top of his drop, that's when, at that point, he should know where he's going with the ball. You'd ideally want the ball out at that point. Your tackles, they understand, well, he's dropping to this depth. They understand that's how they're going to try and, direct the edge rusher past that point, if possible, if they can't just stonewall him there. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to see a quarterback having the feel for the game and feel for the pocket, to where if the pressure is coming, if he understands, well, my left tackle is going to, have a little bit of pressure more than usual, he has to be cognizant of that. If you can get to that drop, make like I said, a nice quick step up to kind of evade that. Plus, it's all about the angles too. Sometimes you want to, step up to get a little better angle on the throw. Sometimes it's just there's not a good window to throw the ball to. So a lot of that movement is also that. But again, Mustafa, Whitehair's had a bad year. Today it was Dieter Iceland was the third right guard in. It's hard. It's this O-line has to be addressed. I mean, it was talked up like it was going to be addressed really big this year, and this didn't happen.
Yep.
It just seemed like they didn't make. Ryan Poles had talked a big game about his O-line, but when it came right down to it, he didn't really do much until training camp was about to start, and he brought in Schofield and Reef, and then Schofield was cut. He wasn't very good. They brought him back, and he's thank goodness he's been serviceable, because they had nothing else there. So I talked about it on my show before. I mean, Dakota Dozier was a big right guard plan here for the Bears. He was starting with this team all summer.
Yep.
That guy, he's on IR. He couldn't even play for the Vikings last season. He was a practice squatter for them, and that was Ryan Poles' free agent acquisition to bring in. That was his guy. He brought in Lucas Patrick. That injuries was all over the place, but you got to do more to upgrade the O-line. This offseason is going to be huge for him.
Yep.
Tevin Jenkins is obviously a guy, but he gets hurt a lot. You got to have some other guy there. Leatherwood, inactive today. He looked bad so far in his last game. So what do you do there? Braxton Jones, like I said, I just broke down his film last week, which against the Bills was pretty good. Here he is this week. Awful. Again, the bull rush. If that's the one hole in his game, he could work on that. It may never be fixed, but he can figure out a way to kind of work through that. But still, Reef on the right side, you need a right tackle. You need at least, 3 starting quality offensive linemen to come in and be on his team. Then, of course, the trenches on the other side, the defense. It's bad over there, too. It's a bad football team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Lester, to give the benefit of the doubt and suggest that Claypool must, quote, just be hurt, which who's to say, right? But let's pretend he is, to give just as much benefit of the doubt as possible. You still probably want, Claypool included, 2 veritable Mooney-level receivers, if you can get them. Whether that's Claypool or not is frankly up to Chase. But if you could get a better one, great. I mean, there's a real argument on a day like today, Lester. There's no play that sticks out to me more. I understand it was 3rd and 19, but there's no play that sticks out to me more across these last 2 games than Justin Fields at the end of the game, 3rd and 19. Drops back into the pocket, feels a little bit of pressure from the right-hand side. Reef dumps his man. Fields jumps over the guy and starts to trot sideways. Not a full roll, right? Not sprinting to the sidelines, but just trotting to the sidelines. Gets all the way to the sidelines. Stands on the sidelines for 2 more seconds before finally a defensive edge rusher closes on him and he's got to get rid of the ball. Receiver looked so bad today that as poor as their defensive line has been, and as talked about as that is, and as poor as their offensive line has been, and as talked about as that is, Lester, it is hard. It's going to be tough to convince me that the Bears don't have maybe the biggest need on the team at receiver when you look around the league and you see A.J. Brown rescuing a lifeless Eagles offense with a backup quarterback, when you see Mike Evans having a huge hand in winning the Buccaneers the division at the very end of the season. Not everybody in all of these cases, not every receiver is 100% like consistent week to week. It's not that easy, but the Arizona Cardinals were utterly lifeless until DeAndre Hopkins got back. And then for a couple weeks, they had something going because they had their big receiver. Look, I don't know whether it's going to be Quentin Johnston, JSN, or somebody out or down in the second round, but Lester, I will tell you that it is so abysmal watching these receivers play football. The one play we got to see was that, what, 2nd and 10? Do you remember the one I'm talking about where they ran like all slants? And you could clearly see on television that the Lions just blanketed it. I mean,
Yeah.
the Lions went so far as to blanket a right tackle leak because they just caught the Bears trying to leak Riley Reef out, and Justin Fields had nowhere to go with the ball. And if I was Fields, I'd be frustrated too. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't understand, or there's just not a lot of options for what the Bears are asking their quarterback to do. And look, whether it's offensive line, whether it's receiver, yes, I say a lot of this because I love offense, but the Bears offense to me, Lester, feels so under-talented that it is becoming unhealthy for anybody to play quarterback at that spot. And if that means that you need to address defensive line more so in free agency than at the top of the draft, I don't know what other choice you really have, because Alan Lazard isn't going to save this Bears receiver or receiver core. You know what I mean? Like, they need a guy. They need a guy that's probably a little better than Darnell Mooney, so that Darnell Mooney, who has had enough of an impact. I mean, Lester, do you think it's an accident? I'll throw it to you with this. I know I've been talking a lot. Do you think it's an accident that Darnell Mooney is lost for the season, and almost immediately whatever the Bears had rolling on offense evaporated? Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think there's something there?
Well, Mooney was having a down season to begin with, but he was still Fields' most trusted receiver. I mean, he trusted him in clutch situations. He went there when he had to. I think best case scenario, Darnell Mooney is a 2. I think best case scenario, and this is, based on what he did as a rookie, best case scenario, Chase Claypool is ceiling as a number 2. The Bears don't have that alpha. They don't have that one. You talk about a guy like A.J. Brown, who was available in the offseason. He would have looked nice in this offense. But you talk about options. If he doesn't have the time to work through his options to get there, you talk about the failed touchdown pass where they leaked Reef out in the flat. If Fields would have had a tick second longer, he had Cole Kmet coming behind Reef. He could have hit him for the touchdown there, but the time wasn't there. There's not enough time for him to make these decisions. He's trying to go through his progressions, and then he just can't get through them all the time. I know in Sack Watch last week, I broke down a play, and Fields had Bayless Jones wide open, but the way the defense had him reading it was right to left. And he just didn't have time to get back to Bayless Jones, who was wide open. It's just rough. It's just if he doesn't have the time to make his plays, there's not much can be said for him. You want to see more of him as a pocket passer. He knows he has to do more as a pocket passer. But what are you going to do when the talent around him is so bad? I mean, we're not going to see the best of this. It's bad saying because this year was a wasted season, because I think you did find out a few things. You found out Fields is capable if he has some more talent. You believe in that he has something there. But as a passer, we're still not sure where he is because, we haven't seen what he can do there. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Bears to see how much they really believe in Justin Fields and how much they truly want to build it up. But like you said, free agency is going to come first. Maybe they go heavy on defense because the defense is awful. Well, and then in the draft, then you can address, O-line early, wide receiver early. It's going to be interesting.
And I know this isn't an off-season podcast, Lester. It's a post-game podcast. But after a game like this, I think you can agree that
that's all we have.
It's about the off-season.
Looking forward, yeah.
Because the problem is that do I really blame the team for functionally giving up in the second half? I mean, it's not good. You don't want that from your team. But I don't think the Bears' defense was giving up points for lack of trying. I think they were just getting beat. And so on the offensive side, I don't think they were getting whooped for lack of trying. I think they were just getting beat. No, the body language wasn't great from Justin Fields, but right at the end of the game, we see him and a Lions defensive tackle laughing together. And I like to think I have an inkling of what they may or may not have been talking about. But the point is, Lester, thankfully the Bears do have the money. So for instance, Draymond Jones very well may escape Denver. He's a very solid 3 technique and a spicy interior pass rusher. Is he Jalen Carter? He's not. Is he Aaron Donald? He isn't. Is he Chris Jones? No, he's not, Lester. But he's a lot better than Justin Jones and nobody. right? So if you theoretically, to use an example, add Deron Payne and Draymond Jones, it's hard to do, but you would make your defensive line a lot better without needing to draft a defensive line superstar. Because the problem is, like you're mentioning, Lester, there are so many positions you could point to, and theoretically, let's pretend that the best player in the draft played wide receiver. Well, that'd be the obvious choice. Or if they play, if the best player in the draft plays left tackle, well, that'd be the obvious choice. Best player in the draft plays defensive end. Well, that'd be the obvious choice. The Bears have so many holes across their roster that this draft fits them in so many ways because so many pieces of the team are just that bad. And so I'm going to be curious to see what they do, but I will mention what gives me, or what really intrigues me, Lester, is that this free agency class is a little better in the trenches than it is at the skill positions.
Yeah.
And so that makes me wonder, the Bears still have a first round draft pick, Lester, in 2024. Like I think a lot of people have spoken like they've got to fix the whole team in 2023. They don't have to fix the whole team in 2023. At least not with blue chip talent. You can only do so much, right? So which position is too important to wait on? And which position do you need to add talent ASAP so that in 2024 and 2025, you've got your guys that are starting to find their rhythm? One more thing I want, or like maybe it's wide receiver, maybe it's edge rusher. One more thing that I want to mention, Lester, take a look at around the league. Look at Geno Smith. Look at Jalen Hurts. Look at all kinds of quarterbacks. I think you'd agree, Lester, that as much as we want to rush to come to judgment on quarterbacks, we want to say, is he the guy or not? Geno is a great example of how time in the league just makes you a faster processor. Like it's not that complicated. We make this too complicated sometimes, right? Where right now the quarterbacks dominating the league are Josh Allen, they're Patrick Mahomes, they're sure Justin Herbert's up there, but if you take a look through, even Jared Goff is in this conversation, and he had another great game today with with a crazy completion percentage. Is it any surprise, Lester, that these guys have been in the league for at minimum 4, and in many cases 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? Like Justin Fields' processing can only be so fast right now. He's a second-year player that came out of Ohio State, where Ohio State has some of the best receivers in the NFL. Like not just in college. Like if you took Ohio State's receiver core from when Justin Fields was a player, you would be having Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. You could legitimately say, Lester, that he had better receivers in college than he had in the pros, which is crazy. Sure. I mean, that should not be, right? And so I just look at this situation thinking to myself, I don't think that Rome can be built in a day. I don't think the Bears are going to be able to build the Eagles offense around Justin Fields overnight. It's just not that easy, right? But thankfully, we've seen Jalen Hurts show us that you can go from having the longest time to throw in football to getting better. Maybe not fastest ever, but getting better, right? And so I, like you, want to see the Bears. I want to see what Ryan Poles does. Like, where does he push his chips in? That's going to be the core question that I want to see answered.
It's got to be the trenches. I mean, it's still football. It's still won and lost in the trenches. I think you really got to upgrade, O-line, D-line, and then you kind of just, as far as the draft goes, then you kind of go BPA. And if you get, if Jalen Carter or Will Anderson or those are the guys at the top of the draft, you feel that's the way to go, you pull the trigger. If you can trade back, I mean, what is the talent drop off with a guy like Carter to the next 3-tech guy? That's something the Bears are going to have to figure out here. If it's worth them going back and picking up some more draft picks, I think they got to do it because this team needs talent. This team needs talent across the board. The best way to get that is with several draft picks. We saw Ryan Poles play this game last year on day 3, which is nice to get more bites of the apple, so to speak. But if you can use your first round pick and get more day 2 and day 1 draft picks, that's obviously better because you have a better chance to hit on those guys. So it's got to be the trenches. It's got to be O-line, maybe receiver. But again, you're going to find your number 1 receiver for the most part. You draft those guys. And if you can get a guy on day 2, I think that's the way you go there. That's why I said trade back off that first pick if you can. Get some more picks. Find a receiver. Like I said, you got Mooney. He's fine. You got Claypool. Hopefully he's a little better. But after that, the entire receiving core is going to be reworked again because Pringle's a free agent. Harry, he's a guy. He's nothing special. Dante Pettis, come on, that guy's not going to be around in Chicago next season. Bayless Jones will be here. I think he's a great fourth or fifth option as a gadget guy, but he's not a guy you count on to be your number one. So it's going to be another huge rebuild, so to speak, next season. Although they have a few pieces in place, can you go to compete for the playoffs next season? Unlikely, but we see it every season. Worst to first, and then the NFC. What is it? If you're a 8-9 team, you're in the playoff discussion.
Yep,
it's not fun and exciting, but realistically, they could kind of push for that.
Yep,
but still.
Dan Wiederer the other day said that it would be multiple years before the Bears were playing meaningful December football. And the problem is, Lester, meaningful December football pretty much just means being in that silly in the hunt graphic, and that is a low bar. Like that's like 6-11. That's like 7-10. I mean, it's not to say that it's easy to win that many more games, but there are too many of these Bears games that have literally come down to a field goal to win it drive, one way or another, where if they kept a few more points off the board or put a few more points on the board, they very well may have come out the other way. You could say the Bears have been horrifically unlucky this season, and still they've only won 3 games. I mean, it's not that it's an easy path to the playoffs ever, right? But I think you'd agree, Lester, that a jump to becoming the next Giants team isn't that far-fetched if the coaching staff can put their thinking caps on. But Lester, like you said earlier, we'll keep it a relatively small show. There's a lot of discussion to be had, but probably not right now. Happy New Year, am I right? So you give me your final thoughts on this Bears game.
Burn the tape. I mean, like I said, there's nothing good to come out of this. Hopefully Justin Fields is not injured. Like I said, it looked like he may have got dinged up a little bit. Hopefully Tevin Jenkins' neck is fine. Hopefully they were just being really cautious with him. They pulled him out early in the game with a little neck injury. We'll have more about the injuries during the week on the podcast and the video channel, obviously. But let's just get the hell out of here and sim the season. This last game is meaningless. Don't get anybody hurt, and let's build this up in the offseason, see what happens.
I'll tell you, Lester, that the most positive thing I can say about this Bears game, because there's not much to say, is I am legitimately surprised that this kind of a blowout hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at this Bears team, it was never good enough to compete with a team like Miami, to go toe-to-toe with a team like Buffalo, where they were winning after the first half. It wasn't good enough to give the Eagles a scare. It wasn't good enough to beat the 49ers. And I know so many people want to talk about weather across the board, but the idea that finally hits started to wear out a little bit when we played one of the best offenses in the NFL in a dome at their home field, that suddenly this means that Matt Eberflus and this regime can't work. To me, I don't think that's fair. I mean, I don't think it's fair to jump down the throat of Justin Fields when the cast around him is obviously so poor. Is he a franchise guy, Lester? Who cares? I mean, he's the starting quarterback for 2023. And as far as I know, or like as far as I'm concerned, that's really all that matters, because that'll give us a lot more data and make a better decision on his 5th-year option. I feel like games like Dallas should have been this level of blowout. And I guess according to the box score, maybe it was, but that was a game all the way until the 4th quarter. I mean, it is surprising to me how competitive these Chicago Bears have been, despite the adversity that they've faced this season. It isn't a good team, but it wasn't a good team. It's not like they got that much worse. Well, I guess they did lose a couple of their best players, obviously, but it's more to say, Lester, the depth was always getting tested. There were huge problems across the roster that have been problems across the roster. Getting beat like this is always a bell ringer, and nobody ever likes it. But I do think, like you're mentioning, this is a game that 2 years in the future will remember how ugly it was, but it won't have the impact that you feel like it has today. Right? That gross feeling where you just watched your team's laundry get kicked up and down the field for 3 hours, like that will go away with time. I'm very curious to see what Ryan Poles comes out with. This loss does help the Bears in the long term, and now all eyes turn to, honestly, probably that Texans-Colts game. Because if they can come out with this season and still get the 1st overall pick, I think there's a lot to be legitimately hopeful for. 2nd overall pick is great too. It looks as if everybody mentions, like Eberflus has now said that Justin Fields is going to start next game if he's healthy. Fields said, I want to play no matter what the score is. So the Bears are at least paying lip service to the idea that Fields will be playing week 18. So obviously, hopefully everybody stays healthy. But Lester, I can't help feeling that this was coming. The Bears ran into a hot team and got buzzsawed in half. And I mean, past a certain point, you almost think it's chalk, you know? And
Yeah.
so if it really happened the way that we probably could have drawn it up, there's only so much being mad that I can do. But
Yeah.
that'll about do it for us. Lester, what can people be watching for?
Yeah, we got stuff, the whole week, like always. We've already started transitioning some of our off-season coverage. Jacob's doing a great job with his draft stuff. Greg Gabriel started doing some individual player scouting for the site. So that'll be there. Plus, of course, the podcast channel stuff all week. Video channel, Second City Gridiron stuff all week. So, we got everything Bears related covered from all directions.
We absolutely do. And so with that in mind, I'll go ahead and sign off. Bears fans, thanks so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your New Year's Day. Best of luck to you in 2023. And until next time, bear down. And thanks so much for bearing with me. Lester, that'll do it for the podcast. Okay, so somebody mentions that the NFC North will be interesting next year. I got to ask you, do you think that the Vikings will be just as good next year as they are this year?
You talk about the Bears' luck going the bad way. Vikings' luck has all gone the good way. I mean, they're involved in so many close games. I guess can't see that being sustainable. Although when you have one of the best, receivers in the game today and a quarterback capable of getting in the ball, you're always going to be in the game. So I could see them hanging around, but I think they have their the lucky horseshoe season this year. Packers, hopefully, or the Aaron Rodgers era is coming to a close. I think we're all sick of seeing that kind of stuff. Then the Lions, you mentioned it a little while ago. A lot of people think this is the old Lions that they've always sucked. But this legitimately is one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yep.
They're top 5 DVOA, I believe, top 5 in all categories. Very, very good offense. Jared Goff. A season ago, everyone thought, okay, that Goff's just a stopgap. But now at this point, the Lions got to be thinking, maybe this is the guy we roll with. And maybe they're going to stick with him and draft other places because Goff's playing pretty good, when the talent around him is better. Like you said, if the talent's around your quarterback is better, a guy can process a little quicker. He understands what's going on with the game. He's serviceable enough to where you can get him some wins. So it's going to be interesting. I don't see the Bears competing next year for much, but like you said, that end to hunt graphic, come on. If you're 7-8 at this point, there's games now going on where teams are like 7 wins, 6 wins, and they're still alive. The Packers are still alive.
Easily.
The Lions are a losing team. They're still alive. Well, I guess they're an even team now, but come on. It's all it takes is a couple breaks here and there, and you're back in the playoff hunt.
It doesn't hurt anything, Lester, that okay, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if there's something that the research that I've done over the last year or so has really led me to thinking about, Lester, it's how often we as fans get caught up talking about players like they're a commodity instead of talking about a player like they're a person, right? And I know that that's corny. I understand this is a pretty hokey topic to broach, but it's more to say that somebody like Jared Goff, we declare that his third, fourth year with the Rams, he's limited and he sucks. Right. So then the Lions trade for Jared Goff and we go, well, Jared Goff's limited and Jared Goff sucks. Right. And we don't even allow the thought to enter our minds that maybe after 6 years of sitting in different quarterback rooms, 6 years of sitting on or standing on practice fields, reading defenses, 6 years of starting football games, Lester, that a guy who was a slow processor early in his career might have gotten a little better. Like, how many times can you get fooled by the same cover 2 shell roll to cover 3 before you just see it coming, right? Where you say, that safety's lined up over there. He's cheating backwards. I know what this is. Like, it's simple, right? But it's just like how I know Bill Zimmerman told us that the quarterbacks that he's talked to, whether it's Phil Simms, whether it's, he even had like a tangential conversation, I believe, with Drew Brees at some point. And what they all tend to say is the most frustrating part about retiring, I guess I'm looking at you, Tom Brady, is that when you are 45, when you are 41, your brain processes the game better than ever. I mean, it's not like any of that faded. You know football better than you ever have, and your body just can't do it anymore. And so with somebody like Justin Fields, I feel like we've seen extreme accuracy from the pocket. I feel like one of the other things that I feel like we've seen, Lester Fields has not allowed the raucous amount of sacks he's taken to affect him to affect his poise in the pocket. And by that, I mean like his throwing form. I mean, that sack season you're talking about pretty much ruined Jay Cutler's mechanics forever. Like, looking back, he never trusted his line ever again. And so I'm amazed at what Fields has endured. I'm a little stunned at what Fields has been made to endure, but I can't help thinking that if the Bears do play the long game here, Fields should become every bit the quarterback that we think he will, which I'm not trying to put a label on whether that means top 5 quarterback, top 10 quarterback. Like, that's a relative ranking, but like the electric leg quarterback with an absolute cannon that can read his first 2 reads out very quickly and very efficiently, put the ball on a target, assuming that target is open. Like, this is a quarterback you can easily win because of. And I just want to see the Bears build a personnel system, or like a personnel on that offense that's dangerous enough to allow Fields to be at his best, instead of doing this thing that I know you and I have done, Lester, where we've gone back and forth as early as week 2, basically saying, okay, I know that this person massively screwed up, but Fields could have saved it if he did, right? Like, we've been asking Fields to play fireman for so long now that it's easy to forget that there are plenty of guys. I hate to bring up Trubisky, but there were years of the Trubisky life cycle where the guy came open and the pocket was well put together and the throw or the reach just wasn't there. We aren't dealing with that with Justin Fields. We're dealing with, he's not Patrick Mahomes. And I actually find the conversation kind of exhausting, because we can't talk about how the wide receivers are basically practice squatters and the offensive line can't block just about anything, and then go back and say, well, and Fields sucks too because he didn't pass for 300 yards in the face of it. You know what I mean?
Well, he has the athleticism. He has the scrambling ability. He has the ability to do the designed runs. So we know he's really good at that. If he could just become to the point where he has enough pass pro, he has enough weapons where his as a passer, now he's in the average realm. That's all you need out of Justin Fields, because the other part is elite. He gets that boosted up. And then eventually it all starts playing into each other. Eventually, we kind of see him grow as a quarterback. And like you said, as the years go on, his processing gets better. We'll see that happen. But it's going to be hard to happen until we actually see him get those weapons and get the pass pro, because
I'm having visions of a certain purple wearing MVP as you say this. Like, everything you just described is pretty much like to the T Lamar Jackson, right? Yeah. Where you're saying he's an elite runner, and as soon as we get an average passer out of him, he's going to rip the league a new one. And Lamar literally won an MVP doing that. Yep. I mean, it's weird to discuss that the Bears might have a potential MVP candidate on their hands, like at quarterback, for crying out loud. Are we living in a dream? And so I hope it doesn't become a nightmare just because the Bears screw up putting talent around him. But we're just gonna have to see.
It's a ways away, but again, it's the trenches. You give him enough time. Let him process. Let him get to his third read once in a while. Hell, let him get to a second read once in a while, because he's not even able to do that sometimes. If that happens, 1, 2, 3, go. And then we're going to see him, still get the scrambling yards. He may never approach 1,000 yards in a season again. And hopefully he doesn't, because that means that the passing side is kind of picked up. But, at this point as Bears fans, what else do we have? But I look forward to the hope that Ryan Poles gets it right, because what's the alternative? That he doesn't, and now we're back in a rebuild again, and a whole other new regime change, and Coach Flus is not the guy, Ryan Poles is not the guy. That's just It's horrible to think about as Bears fans, but it's probably, maybe it is. Who knows? But at this point, I think it's too early to tell. I know my mentions are full of people saying, "Oh, it's time to get rid of Poles, time to get rid of Eberflus." I'm like, come on, it's one season. This is a throwaway game at the end of the year
And
against a great offense. They
and
just got
Lester,
their asses beat.
in large part, we knew this was going to happen. I
Yeah,
mean, you and I have just been in this a little like you longer than me, but I've been in this long enough to know that no matter what happens, when you lose 9 games in a row, people are going to start to freak out, right? There's just no way around it. And so within that, I'm interested. Like I know that there are going to be people calling for Flus and Poles' job. I'm not going to look anybody in the eyes and say that Ryan Poles is clearly like the best general manager ever. A lot of the talent ads that he's added, well,
questionable.
it's
It's
not
fair.
like Byron Pringle has been the guy. It's not like Chase Claypool is looking like a beast. I mean, they've been low expenses. Like Lucas Patrick doesn't cost anything, right? But Larry Ogunjobi isn't exactly looking great in Pittsburgh right now, and he was about to be a $15 million man. We digress.
That injury saved.
Whew,
Yeah, it was rough.
like it's weird, but at the same time, Lester, Poles is also crazy young, and I
Yeah,
legitimately believe good GMs make mistakes all the time. Bad GMs double down on their mistakes.
yeah.
Like the real problem isn't did Poles have a rough first off season. The problem will be if he tries to make that bad off season into a good thing by extending ESB for like an extremely long time. We digress. The main thing I know I look at with this Bears team, and I just can't help but think about it, Lester. I really appreciate your perspective on just like if Fields had the time to get to his second or third read, what could happen. And I'd also raise you that if Fields didn't have to, if Fields' first read was open more often because of talent on the perimeter, that makes things easy too. I mean, just like I know, Lester, when you eventually play the 49ers in the playoffs, like Nick Bosa is going to take a couple reps off of you. And
Yeah.
so when he does, you can't get super furious that your rookie left tackle out of the 5th round and Braxton Jones got his ass handed to him a couple times by an edge rusher that's paid a gajillion dollars. In those moments, it's more helpful to have a receiver that just quick separates, right? That you take a 5-step drop and you get the ball out immediately, because whether it's Jackson Smith-Jigba or Quentin Johnston or trading for Devontae Adams, whatever it looks like, Lester, you got the ball out before Nick Bosa was able to get to you. Bears fans, we had Khalil Mack forever. Or at least it felt like forever. The apex predator, one of the most dangerous edge rushers in football. And quick passing teams could neutralize him because, I mean, Lester, it takes a certain amount of time just to run to the quarterback, right? It's like what they used to talk about in baseball, where it's like the ball travels faster than your feet. Like throw the ball. And so within that, I really hope that the Bears invest in both. I don't think it has to be one or the other. Like, we don't have to deal with the same offensive line situation, but we got a shiny new receiver. You can get both. It just may cost a little bit on the defensive end, but that all depends on what a defensive head coach is willing to accept, right? Because if Matt Eberflus says, I'm not giving up my shiny defensive player,
Yeah.
he wouldn't be the first. That's how we got Patrick Surtain in Denver instead of Justin Fields. And I just don't know if that's something they're excited about. But it's New Year's Day. Do you want to close up?
Yeah, let's get the hell out of here.
Perfect. Guys, any listeners, thank you so much for supporting the channel. We got one more week of this, and then we can finally start off-season stuff for real instead of hinting at it and bleeding into it anyways. So
and there's a really cool off-season project coming. We haven't really made an official announcement, but I know Robert, you are going to be very involved in this.
Yeah.
Jeff Burkus is very involved in this. Jacob Infante is going to be involved in this. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of cool off-season content planned here. So whether it's video channel or podcast channel, or even on the site, Windy City Gridiron, stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Should be. And I will see you guys on All 20 Tuesday, where I'm sure we'll cover this game.
I want a t-shirt, All 20 Tuesday.
You know what? We can do that. We can do that. But on All 20 Tuesday, we'll probably cover this game a little bit, and then we'll cover more fun stuff like free agent additions and how does the cap work and the other burning questions that you have about this Bears offense going forward. Whether that means draft, whether that means maybe I see if I can't. Look, it's going to be very unlikely I can scoop the tape, but I mean, Lester, come on. What am I supposed to think when a guy who's 6'4" and might run a 4.3 catches 6 balls for 163 yards in a huge TCU upset over Michigan? Like, does that not get you excited? Can you imagine what it would be like if Justin Fields could hit Quentin Johnston rolling over in the flat and then just like score a touchdown off of it? Like, it's not that simple, but but I know that. Ooh, anyways, good stuff, everybody. Talk to you soon.